This is WCBU election coverage. I'm WCBU News Director Tim Shelley. Tonight, we bring you a forum with the candidates on the ballot for Peoria Mayor in the February 23rd election. They are Rita Ali, Andres Diaz, Jim Montelongo, Sid Ruckriegel, and Shama St. Louis. Tonight's forum is being done on Zoom because of the pandemic, so please forgive any audio hiccups you might hear along the way. The forum will last approximately 90 minutes. Each candidate will be allowed 2 minutes for an opening statement and 1.5 minutes for a closing statement. Additionally, each candidate will be given 90 seconds to respond to each question. A timer will be on the Zoom forum, so all candidates will be aware of the time. Questions will be asked the candidates in rotation, so each will have an opportunity to be the first to answer. The questions were chosen solely by me, and the candidates did not see them in advance. As you'll hear, many of them were shaped and submitted by Peoria residents themselves. Mr. Diaz won the privilege to do opening statements first. And at the end of our time, he will start closing statements. Pardon me. And before we get started, thanks to the League of Women Voters of Greater Peoria and the Peoria Public Library for all their work as co-sponsors of this event. Mr. Diaz, you're up first with your 2-minute opening statement.
Thank you, and thank you for hosting this forum. Hello, everyone. I'm Andres Diaz. Many call me Andy, and if you've known me a while, you just call me Diaz. I'm a proud product of Peoria. I grew up in the North End, first-generation American, living the American dream. Woodruff High School, class of '96, North Side pride. Bachelor's in political science from Bradley University. Like many other proud Peorians, I've returned to give back to my community and help it thrive. 4 years ago, Catherine, my wife, and I were blessed to find our home in the North Valley, where we live with our 4 children and next door to my parents, Rigo and Maria. I work to do good in my neighborhood. Like all of you, I have pride where I live. When I looked around my neighborhood and saw that 30% of it was vacant homes and abandoned lots, I took action. I kept up the lots. I planted some gardens and opened a farmer's market where we've hosted over 40 small businesses. We start our 3rd year in June. To get where I am now took hard work, and it seemed as if the hardest of that work was dealing with City Hall. I know my frustrations aren't unique, and we need to change that to begin to grow our community. We have so many talented people in Peoria. We have to empower and enable them to achieve their dreams. We do that with a responsive City Hall that doesn't determine winners and losers before we ever know who is in the race. As your mayor, I'll bring policies to the council floor that make it easier to deal with City Hall. Not just talk about problems, but actually address them. I hope to earn your vote with my responses to not only the questions today, but also to those that I publish on my website, diazformayor.com, in response to the interest groups sending questionnaires looking to give their endorsement. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Montelongo, your 2-minute opening statement.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I'm Jim Montelongo. Just a little over 31 years ago, I came to Peoria with a dream to complete a degree in engineering at Bradley University. While attending Bradley University, I met a beautiful young lady who was from Peoria, and also working on completing her degree that I would later marry. Not only did I fall in love with my wife, but I did it with this community, where I have raised my 3 sons, built a business over 30 years, volunteered in many organizations, and have had the honor of serving as a 3-term Peoria City Councilman. I am campaigning for mayor because I believe in Peoria. Peoria is our home. This is a great place to raise a family, build a career, and work for a great company in our community. But Peoria also has some very serious financial issues that we must address and confront. We have $330 million in pension liability, $150 million in combined sewer overflow, $40 million in the Pierre Marquette debacle, a declining population and revenues. Our property tax is one of the highest in Illinois. As the mayor of Peoria, I will focus on getting our financial house in order, focus on basic city services, police, fire, and our roads. and I want to put forth the largest effort ever made in Peoria to help businesses grow and expand. I want to take my 30 years of being a business owner, a master's in business administration, and my 3 terms of being a city council member to take on these challenges. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reckriegel, your 2-minute opening statement, please.
Thank you to the League of Women Voters for having us for tonight's forum. 2 years ago, I was able to walk every 3rd grader from Peoria Public Schools through City Hall. And while our goal there was to be able to teach them a civics lesson and also about the many jobs that are contained within that red brick building, what I really saw was the fact that they believed that city government could solve problems. They knew the challenges, they knew the problems uniquely that were Peoria. And even at that young age, they understood what lay in front of us. I moved to Peoria in 1992 to start a business. And upon doing so, I found a community that I fell in love with, one that I went into the neighborhoods to work, to make friends, to be able to walk door to door. And I saw the challenges that we face right there. And I started to work immediately within my community. Some projects were small, some projects were larger. And that community service never ended prior or never began prior to knowing that Peoria could be a better place. Community service is what drove me to the city council. And I come from there with the experience of business, the experience of community service. But why am I running for mayor? I'm running because those 3rd graders, they put a challenge in front of us that City Hall really can solve the problems that lie ahead. And I think that we owe a promise to them to make for sure that we make Peoria the place that they are proud to call home.
Thank you for your opening statement. Ms. St. Louis, your opening statement, please.
Hi, my name is Shama St. Louis, and I am running for mayor because Peorians deserve a mayor who wants to reinvest in our communities and prioritize putting more money in people's pockets. And one of the ways I plan to do that is with the monthly stimulus program over incentivizing developers and corporations. Peoria deserves someone who wants to rebuild the table and give residents decision-making power concerning their own communities, and who wants to reimagine public safety as access to resources and opportunities and create a community safety department. I'm running because Peoria needs a mayor who wants to rejuvenate our economy by prioritizing scalable and startup businesses over big chains, and who is focused on fixing systemic issues, not continuing the status quo where a few benefit at the expense of many. Peorians deserve a mayor who they can identify with and who was active in the community working to change systemic issues that have failed all of us prior to running for office. I have envisioned a community where everyone has a shared unity of purpose and a shared sense of destiny, where everyone is celebrated and diversity and inclusion welcome and marginalization doesn't exist. I have a vision to create a culture in local government where we look deeply at our current practices in our systems and our institutions and ask ourselves 3 main questions. Who benefits from things being the way they are? Who has been harmed from things being the way they are? And what practices do we have in place that made it possible before we make decisions? I have envisioned a government where we begin to undo the cultural programming and socialization that makes us racist, sexist, homophobic, and allows us to let oppressive systems go unchecked. I deserve your vote because no other candidate has created a vision that challenges the status quo. Thank you.
Ms. Ali, your 2-minute opening statement, please.
Thank you to our hosts, the League of Women Voters of Greater Peoria, WCBU Public Radio, and Peoria Public Library. This is a unique time in Peoria's history when a new mayor will be elected amid multiple crises, a global pandemic, a recession, and civic unrest. This situation requires experienced and proven leadership to spearhead collective efforts to stabilize Peoria's social and economic climate and lead our city toward recovery and revitalization. My mindset is that every problem is an opportunity, Peoria is struggling, and it has been further beaten down by a terrible pandemic. Muhammad Ali said, "You don't lose if you get knocked down. You lose if you stay down." Peoria will not stay down. I am passionate about building a stronger Peoria that future generations will enjoy and be proud of. My extensive executive leadership experience in education, proven success in securing over $50 million in external funding for workforce and education programs, and documented strategies for building bridges between people and communities makes me the right candidate to serve as Peoria's mayor. As mayor, I will prioritize jobs, economic development, population growth, neighborhood safety, education, and equity. Like Columbus, Ohio, the fastest growing city in the Midwest, I envision Peoria becoming a smart city, using digital technology to connect, protect, and enhance the lives of our citizens. Peoria can grow in a similar fashion with a bold vision that builds on our current foundation. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we now move into our first question. This one concerns the Peoria budget. We know Peoria just faced a round of difficult budget cuts and adjustments due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic. The city also faces major long-term financial challenges, with more hard choices likely needed in upcoming budget cycles to keep the budget balanced. What specific taxes, fees, or cuts does your plan to fund the city government moving forward include? Mr. Montelongo, you have the first response.
Well, I would say this, being a business owner for 30 years, I have come across many different challenges. My company has competed with some of the best and brightest companies across the world, from India, from China, and the US. We've had to become very innovative to stay competitive and to compete for new business. I would say I want to take that same type of attitude to address our budget. As far as the budget goes, we need to be focusing on growth. We can no longer tax our people. We can only cut so much at City Hall. And the only way out of this mess that we're in is for growth. I want to help our small and medium-sized businesses grow. I want to use a plan that is called economic gardening, where cities like Rochester, New York, who are facing the very same challenges that we were facing, found a way to get out of the problems by helping small and medium-sized businesses grow. They grew thousands of new employees, and they grew millions of dollars in new revenue. So the option we have is growth. That's our only way out of the problems that we're in today.
Thank you. Mr. Ruckriegel, your response?
I have a strong record of voting against taxes, fines, and fees, including the parcel fee that many of you received in December, a vehicle wheel tax that was thrown around council as a quick revenue source, but would have been very progressive tax on our most vulnerable citizens, and even a business registry fee that would have put us in direct competition with the Chamber of Commerce. We've got a budget that needs to be right-sized. We've got a pension liability. We've got a growing amount of debt that we have not been able to solve, and we keep thinking is the answer to balancing each of these budgets. I actually have the experience to work with large-scale budgets, and I could bring that to be able to lead this conversation for the council as we start from a zero-balanced budgeting source.
Thank you. Ms. St. Louis, your response.
Yes, I would like to start by saying that cities should not be ran like businesses. The government's mission is to provide for all citizens through the common good. So I am not in favor of running a city like a business. It is like a business. It is not the same. And I think to put it quite frank, there isn't much left to cut at this point. We're already cutting into our core services. So I think we should be focusing on core services and growing our local businesses. So any funds for outside developers or companies should be redirected to start and develop local startup and scalable businesses. I think we need to sit down with city staff to explore new ways for Peoria to raise money without raising taxes and fees. And we should explore fully staffing the innovation team so they can help us explore incremental ways Peoria can increase its revenue without spending large sums of money on big projects before we know if they're going to work or not. I think we need to get more creative and stop being so adverse to progressive ideas to generate revenue for our city.
Thank you. Ms. Ali, your response.
Thank you. Our citizens unfortunately have been overtaxed. Our property taxes are higher than they should be. We've had additional user taxes. Our citizens are tired of taxes, and we have to be more creative in terms of ways to generate revenues. You know, when I worked for the private sector, when our customer base changed, we had to change the way that we did business. We had to diversify. And in many ways, the city government has to be more like business in terms of modifying what you're doing, thinking out of the box and being creative in ways to generate revenues. I indicated earlier that I brought $50 million into our city for workforce and education programs. I bring that expertise to the city in terms of building our capacity to bring in external revenues to do the things that we want and need to do. We have to be more creative. We have to partner with our financial institutions, bring in our expert minds. We have a lot of brilliant people in Peoria. We need to utilize those experts in financial industries to help us to find ways to diversify and to bring in new revenues to our city.
Thank you. Mr. Diaz, your response.
Yes, as you pose the question, you really have two different things you have to look at. First is the long-term costs and obligations of the city. Those long-term costs and items that we have to pay for, like the combined sewer overflow, the pension, and all that, we will have to, those didn't happen overnight. In some cases, it's taken us 40 and 50 years to get that bill. But we have to address that over a long-term strategy of making things easier to do at City Hall, to reduce the red tape and make it easier for business to thrive. And that's the short-term thing then that we have to take on, is how people interact with City Hall, the fact that they're not getting responded to in a timely fashion, they're not being engaged, we are not bringing about the best of our community to get the investment back into the heart of the city. So in the short term, we will have to look at the budget and cut expenditures that are those nice to haves, but that aren't actually generating revenue today. I don't have the experience of being on the city council, but I can tell you that the candidates that have been on the council have not introduced those short-term cuts because there are too many sacred cows. We need to stop that, take a look at the budget, and figure out how we get to a balanced budget without adding additional fees, taxes, and costs to the residents of Peoria.
Thank you. Our second question this evening comes from a WCBU listener. There's an advisory referendum on the April ballot on whether the city should increase property taxes to fund police and fire pensions. How are you going to vote on this referendum yourself when you are standing in the polling booth, and why? Mr. Reckriegel, your response first.
I think it's important to remember that right now we sit at about $330 million worth of pension liability, promises that we have made that we do need to keep. But over the next 20 years, we'll grow to almost $750 million. Over the next couple of weeks, we are going to be educating the public, educating ourselves, and really being able to decide how each of us is going to be able to vote on this. And what it is really saying is, should we live within our means, or should we add an additional tax on our property tax to help to be able to help pay for this particular area? And it really puts to the question, what is the most important for the citizens of Peoria? Myself, I have not decided exactly how I will be voting on this, but as I work through the budget on the cycle of what Peoria, the city, is facing as a challenge, I will be taking all of this into consideration.
Thank you. Ms. St. Louis, your response.
Reform is needed at the state level. Our options to ease the financial strain caused by the cost of city pensions is to raise revenues or decrease costs. So we have to meet our obligation to pay the pensions promised to city workers. And I think the city should lobby and work with the governor and state legislators to find an equitable solution that takes care of the workers and eases the burden on the city to provide service to its residents. I am not sure exactly how I would vote on this referendum. I know that the working class is already overburdened with too many taxes and too many fees, and we are often stuck carrying the brunt of poor decision-making at the city level. So until reform comes, we will need to find new revenue streams. And so, like I said before, we need to work with our innovation team, community development, and economic development team to find new sources of revenue without increasing the tax burdens on residents who cannot afford it. And I think that's really important. Government is supposed to be about public interest. So this is not the private sector. We cannot make decisions based off of what would benefit us privately. We have to think about everyone in our community and how it will impact them. And adding another tax or another fee to, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Ali, your response, please.
I was very disappointed that the majority of the council voted to place that question on the ballot. I think most of us know the answer to the question is no, that our citizens do not want increase in property taxes to pay for public safety. They pay for public safety every time they pay their taxes. Public safety is a basic core services that we should be providing. It's also an insult to our public safety employees, to our fire employees, to our police employees. It's an insult to put them out on the chopping block to separate them from the other city employees. It sends a message that we don't value the people that risk their lives every day to help to protect our city. So my vote, of course, will be no. And the majority of the city, I'm sure, will vote no to that question. But what will we do with the answer? The answer should not be to cut more public safety, to cut our core basic services that our citizens need, that our citizens deserve. But I think it's a trick question that we shouldn't even have to be bothered with on the ballot box. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Diaz, your response.
Yes, the idea of this referendum, to Miss Ali's point, it really is about how, as a citizen, do we engage with our community and do we listen to what they're saying? If the community votes yes, they expect us to spend those dollars exactly as they're earmarked. What we have seen is pension fees and taxes and the like added on to our monthly expenses, but it's not always going to what we've promised it to be. So if I had a plan from the city manager or from our council that showed that they were truly going to use the money as it's allocated, or that if we do pass this and add that tax, that the additional revenue that we gain doesn't go and offset or put into a new program and another way to waste money, then I could fully support it. But without that communication from our council, without that clear direction from them that we are not going to go off and now we have extra money, let's go do some new project, then I probably will vote no. But that's a matter of the council, the mayor, and the city manager, as well as public services, police and fire, standing up and educating the public over the next few months so that they know where the money will go, how it will be spent, and what will be offset in the budget later on.
Thank you. Mr. Montelongo, your response.
Real quick, could you repeat the question?
Certainly. This is a question from a WCBU listener. There is an advisory referendum on the April ballot on whether the city should increase property taxes to fund police and fire pensions. How are you going to vote on this referendum when you yourself are standing in the polling booth, and why?
Sure. Okay, thank you. First of all, I have a track record of voting no for tax increases many times over, but I think as far as the pensions go, we have an obligation for those who have worked so hard in our community, serving our city, and we have to pay those. As I mentioned earlier, I want to put together a financial team of experts, work with our city council, and work with our community to help solve this pension crisis issue that we have. So until we get a clear direction for a short-term, medium, and long-term range and how we're going to deal with this, I don't have an answer yet on how I'm going to be voting in the ballot box.
Thank you. Our third question is the people of Peoria are struggling with the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic and its economic fallout. That includes everything from small businesses struggling to survive to more families than ever facing the repercussions of housing and economic insecurity. As Peoria Mayor, how will you lead the city through the pandemic and to recovery without leaving anyone behind? Ms. St. Louis, your response first.
Thank you. I think we need to really think about raising the income floor for our lowest income earners here in Peoria through a monthly stimulus experiment or pilot program that is privately funded. This is happening in cities all over the country now. There's about 30 cities looking to do this. A coalition has been started called Mayors for a Guaranteed Income, and they've formulated a coalition to support each other through this process. So far, Compton, who I like to use, they have 95,000 residents. We have about 110,000, so it's comparable, and they're providing an economic or monthly stimulus for 800 of their lowest income earners, especially because we know that those folks are hit the hardest during a pandemic. So anytime someone is affected during a pandemic, the poorest in our community and the lowest income earners are always hit that much harder. So a monthly stimulus program or experiment would be something that could actually economically empower the residents, but also boost our economy at the same time. And it doesn't cost the residents any additional money. And so I think we need this type of outside of the box type of thinking to be able to generate more revenue for our residents here.
Thank you. Ms. Ali, your response.
Well, you know, we have to have compassion for all of our citizens, especially now during this horrible pandemic. And we know that some are suffering more than others. And really, that's what equity is all about. Equity is greater than even equality in that it understands that everybody's not operating at the same level. And sometimes treating people fairly means treating them differently. Different people have different needs. There are some that are poor or less fortunate than others. And we have to work with our community-based organizations to make sure that we're providing them support so that they can continue to provide support to our residents when they need basic human needs in terms of shelter and food. We have to make sure that the stimulus is being provided in terms of our businesses that are suffering, that they know how to apply for those additional funds. Some people need some additional assistance in applying even the application process to get the additional support. So equity is about removing barriers so that everyone can succeed. As a city, we need to begin to adopt a lens of equity, and so that we're treating everyone fairly and helping everyone to succeed.
Thank you. Mr. Diaz, your response.
COVID's been painful. The last 11 months, I've had friends lose their jobs, friends lose their businesses or shut down for multiple months as they try to figure out how to pivot in this new economy. So when you talk about the fallout, if we don't address that fallout in terms of how are we getting money out to the residents, There has been millions of dollars allocated to the city of Peoria that we haven't fully spent, because when the council and when the city put out the applications, it wasn't clear. I worked with several businesses to help clear things up, and I worked with City Hall to help get that money into the hands of local businesses. These are things that I have done as a citizen. As your mayor, I will work through these processes and look at the applications and figure out, where is it that the bottlenecks occur? And is it because of policy? Is it something that we as city council members can impact? Or is it because of the staffing and the ability or their decision to make things harder than it has to be? I truly believe that we can work to get money out more efficiently when we get federal and state money, and that we can be more compassionate with our residents to make sure that facilities are available to file electronic paperwork like unemployment or business assistance grants, and have the reinvestment in our community if we are engaged.
Thank you. Mr. Montelongo, your response.
Sure, thank you. So the good news is there seems to be light at the end of this tunnel. This has been a complete nightmare, something that we've never faced before as far as the COVID-19 goes. I had a chance to meet with a lot of restaurant and tavern owners and who employ a lot of people, and they need these jobs and they need to keep their businesses going. They were operating at only 25%. They were just struggling to keep things going. After meeting with them and understanding some of their requests, they said, can the city do anything for us? So one of the things that I asked the city manager to come back with is a plan. Is there something we can do with our fees? Can we cut them in half? And that's exactly what our city council voted on and passed, to provide some relief to all those businesses and employers. Some of the other things that I have worked on, certainly a lot of businesses are struggling getting access to the federal stimulus money. I was one of the first to work with our economic development to help them get the latest information so that they could get it out to our businesses. And to make that connection, the businesses employ people go home with paychecks to feed family and pay the bills. So I seen how important that was, and those were the efforts that I took with it.
Very much. Mr. Ruckriegel, your response.
It's hard to believe that we originally thought that COVID might last 2 weeks. And now that we are going into our 9 months, we don't necessarily see that this is going to be a short-term answer. As mayor, I would make sure that we are continuing to push as much of our dollars that come through the federal side as quickly as possible to our small businesses. We have to make sure that our small businesses survive. They are our future. And that goes to our minority businesses and our businesses that are most vulnerable to not be able to make the day. We also need to work with health equities to make for sure that we have seen throughout this pandemic that not all populations are having the same result because of health considerations in this. And we need to make for sure that the city that we came into COVID with is not the city we come out. Lessons learned, we need to make for sure that we have a health system that works for everybody, including the ability for vaccines for those who want them, the ability for testing. And that is something that the mayor can be involved in. The other thing too, is we need to make for sure that our social services all have a good foundation. They're going to be struggling under donations that may be decreasing, and yet they provide a vital service, and we need to make for sure that they are funded properly. A lot of that happens offside the council, but the mayor can take a leading role in being helped to make sure that that message gets through.
Thank you. Next question. With Chief Lauren Marion's retirement, the Peoria Police Department is currently searching for a new permanent leader. What qualities are you looking for in the department's next chief? Ms. Ali, you are first.
Yes, I think that the citizens definitely should be involved in the process of selecting the new police chief. We want to give citizen engagement and citizen voice to that. I want a police chief that can connect certainly with the officers and build a strong team, be respected by that team, have the support of that team, but also a chief who can build bridges between the police and the community. We need more bridges between the police and the community. We need to build more trust. We need to build more accountability on both sides. You know, I served as the chair of the Police Community Relations Commission for over 6 years. Actually, I was on the first one many years ago when I was 14 years old. I've worked to help build bridges between police and community, and I want a leader that will help to move us forward, to help to begin to solve crimes. We have a number of unsolved crimes in our community, and I know we're lean in terms of the number of police we have on our force. We're not at capacity. So many times they don't have time to go back to the old cold cases, but we need to be able to have a police force that is equipped, and we need to solve crimes in order to reduce crime. So safety is very important to the growth of our city. It's important to protecting our citizens.
Thank you. Mr. Diaz, your response, please.
In terms of the qualifications, I want somebody who will listen to the policies and the procedures that we lay out for them. The ultimate decision will lay with the city manager, but as a council and as your future mayor, I will make sure that we do set policy regarding community engagement and how we deal with the public. We have so many opportunities to re-engage the youth, to have programs like the Explorers, and to help interact and work with those in the neighborhoods, to not fear or not to hate the police, but actually to embrace them and work with them. And that is the biggest thing that I want out of a future police chief, is someone who will live within our community, who will live in a neighborhood and be as engaged as their neighbor as they are as the chief of police. We need to make sure that we continue the resident officer program and then look back at what has been successful in the past with our problem-oriented policing teams or neighborhood engagement teams, and how we bring that back and do it in a way that engages residents and makes them see the police as their partner through all of this. We have to tackle the small crime, the prostitution and drug dealing, and all this to make our neighborhoods look better so that people will move back to Peoria and it'll achieve that growth that we all talk about needing for the future.
Thank you. Mr. Montelongo, your response, please.
Sure, thank you. We are in that process of hiring the new police chief, and we absolutely have to get the community's thoughts and opinions on who that next police chief is going to be. Certainly the city council mayor will work with our city manager to express what we're looking for. But I think it's equally as important to be talking to our police department as well and getting their feedback. The type of police chief that I'm looking for, first and foremost, is qualified. She must have the right education, training, and experience to be able to take this job on. Must have the track record that we're looking for. And I'm looking for somebody who is wanting to build trust within the police department, trust within the community, somebody who's more of had the ability to build as a guardian in our community, taking care of people. Those are some of the things that I'm looking for. Talking about our police department, this is something that I'm hearing from all different parts of our city, is that we need more police, and that's the direction that we should be going. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ruckriegel, your response, please.
This is probably one of the most critical decisions that will be facing our community in the near future. And we want to get this right. The person that I would be looking for would be having a full background, an educated background in law enforcement, but it would go way beyond that. They would need to have the ability to communicate with the public at large, but also with individuals, to be able to build trust and relationships with our neighbors, our neighborhoods, and organizations that represent all of Peoria. They would need to be able to be accountable for the actions of their department and help lead in the right ways that could also be able to bridge other gaps. Maybe that would be additional substations. Maybe that would be additional interchanges between our police officers and our citizens. But I would also want them to make for sure that we're adequately staffed and that our workforce is a diverse representation of our full city. I think that our next police chief will have a lot that they are going to be taking on. And with the right training, with the right understanding of our city, with the right desire to be able to help bridge maybe some of those places that we can do better, I think that we can be able to provide a very good move forward on the relationships that we build with law enforcement in our city.
Thank you. Ms. St. Louis, your response.
I think our next police chief, and what I'm looking for, is a Peoria native with a grasp on what our city needs and a grasp on the issues. I think we need a police chief with basic police knowledge, who has a history of community service prior to becoming a police officer or during their time as a police officer, who has social, emotional skills, someone who has a plan for diversity and recruitment and retention for the department, someone who has implicit bias skills, and a plan for the internal climate and improvement, and a plan for transparency. So, you know, and I'm looking for a police chief who is not afraid to challenge the system and stand up for, brutality and issues of injustice that may occur. And then just, remembering that the council is over the police chief. And so I think in addition to those attributes that I'm looking in a police chief, I think, how a police chief acts largely has to do with what the council allows. So just keeping that in mind, but that's what I'm looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. We have a follow-up question on policing. This one is from a WCBU listener who is asking each of you for your positions on criminal justice reforms. Specifically, are there any reforms you would implement at the Peoria Police Department or to the Advisory Committee on Police Community Relations? Mr. Diaz, you have the first response.
Yes, so I have talked about urban advocates. These are people that we work with within the community that actually have that credibility from day one. They are maybe parolees or ex-offenders. They are youth that are trying to get out of a lifestyle that has trapped them. And they are folks that can actually go out into the community and have these dialogue, the dialogue to help bring about change, to identify where the issues are, and to tell us what the true problems are as they see it. This has happened and worked in Oakland, California, where you're then able to employ some of these urban advocates. And you have people that are doing this today on a small scale with Male Mentor Mondays and the growth and development advocates that are in the community. How do we use them and utilize their network of people to help reduce crime? When we talk about the criminal justice reform, we really need to look at what we have as a problem in Peoria, not the problems that face the country or some hotbed, but actually what's happening in Peoria and how we can bring about change through communication and dialogue.
Thank you. Mr. Montelongo, your response?
One of the things I've often heard was, as far as policing goes, we need to have this relationship with our police department, but yet we run on such a efficient team of police officers out there where they're going from one issue to another, to another, to another. They don't have time to build relationships in some of the neighborhoods that need it the most. So one of the proposals that I'm making is that we have a team, 2 people that are together when they go into some of the tough neighborhoods where they have the ability to spend more time with the community, because that's exactly what's needed. I'm also for having more having a police office or substation in some of the higher areas of crime. So we get that chance to develop those relationships. I think those are the things that are important to help build relationships with the police and the community to help solve some of the issues that we have.
Thank you. Mr. Ruckriegel, your response, please.
Thank you. I think a community that never reevaluates and looks at what it can do better never moves forward. And so I think that there's never a time that we shouldn't be looking at, are there things that we could do better, including justice reform? Not long ago, a group of citizens brought together actually somebody from Decatur, Illinois, to be able to look at other possible ways that maybe we could be interacting with some of our young offenders to be able to change where they were and be able to have a different positive impact. We've got reentry programs that are showing some success. And I think that what we really need to do is take a look at social justice reform as a complete totality and be able to be open to ideas that may come forward that could produce some long-term solutions for our community. The biggest failure that we could do is to not be able to look as a community on what we could do better. And I think that this would be a perfect agenda item for one of our committees to be able to take a look and be able to come back to the council with some recommendations.
Thank you. Ms. St. Louis, your response, please.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Certainly. This is a follow-up question on policing from a WCBU listener. The listener asked for each of your positions on criminal justice reform. Are there reforms you would implement at the Peoria Police Department or the Advisory Committee on Police Community Relations?
Yes, so one of the things in my platform about criminal justice reform is reimagining public safety as access to resources and opportunities, and not just about more policing, fire and safety, or more arrests. So we should really look into establishing a community safety department similar to the one that is in Albuquerque. The Community Safety Department in Albuquerque, is a cabinet-led department responding to calls on inebriation, homelessness, addiction, and mental health. And so the department refocuses millions of dollars through the budget process into a public health model with a civilian-led response. So it's a third option for 911 dispatch alongside police and fire. And I think by reimagining public safety, it will be a way for us to reduce crime and take some of the burden off of our overburdened police department while making Peoria a more attractive place to live. So I think that police are trained to deal with violent crimes more than they are things that are done more on a social level. And so therefore, that's what majority of their time should be focused on. So I would love to see a separate community safety department here in Peoria, but then also empower our Police Advisory Commission Board to have more power. So when they are making recommendations, they can actually be implemented.
Thank you. Ms. Ali, your response, please.
Yeah. Criminal justice reform should be an ongoing process. It shouldn't start and stop. I was the former chair of the Police Community Relations Commission, and now I'm the council's liaison to that commission. And I've advocated for body cams, and I believe that body cams have made both citizens and police more accountable. Advocated for no chokeholds and other policies that make us more responsible and accountable. And one thing that I really advocated strongly for was CALEA. CALEA stands for the Commission Accreditation for Law Enforcement Agencies. It's really the gold standard for public safety. It's a improvement process, and it takes a lot of work, a lot of effort in terms of, it takes community engagement as well. But we adopted that methodology a number of years ago. We have a full-time police officer that's committed to keeping us in compliance, and we actually earned, our police force actually earned that badge of honor, accreditation of CALEA standards. It keeps us to high standards. We must continue that. It is an investment. It does cost, but it keeps us accountable. And they adopted that in Ferguson after those incidents that happened there. So I'm glad that Peoria has adopted CALEA.
Thank you. And I'll take a moment to mention you are listening to WCBU election coverage in partnership with the League of Women Voters of Greater Peoria and the Peoria Public Library. This is a forum with the candidates on the ballot for Peoria Mayor in the February 23rd election. The next question goes first to Mr. Montelongo. This one regards Peoria has continued to suffer from population loss. A listener asked, what specific plans will you initiate to broaden Peoria's tax base, both in terms of external promotion and our own internal development?
Sure. And I kind of touched on that earlier. What's most important for Peoria is to focus on growing our small and medium-sized businesses. And I mentioned the economic gardening. And doing that is we work with our small and medium-sized businesses to help them grow new customers, help them expand into new markets, help them in the way of doing things more efficiently in their business. We put together a team of people from our economic development and working with our business community to focus on each and every one of these businesses so that they can grow and expand. I think we also need to take a special focus effort towards our medical industry, since Peoria has become a regional medical hub. And after meeting with some of the executives from the medical industry who have plenty of new jobs that we can help them fill, I think we need to better promote Peoria. So working, helping promote Peoria through advertising are some of the ways that we can help grow Peoria.
Thank you. Mr. Ruckriegel, your response, please.
The only way to really grow our population is through real economic development of livable wage jobs. If you don't have a job, you will look for other places to where you can find to be able to be employed. Work training programs are great, but if there's not a job at the end of the tunnel, we've either forced you to move away or we've broken the promise that we have given you. And I think that economic development should be our main priority because it solves a lot of what we're talking about tonight. And that should be for small business, and it should be for also keeping the businesses that we have here retained and be able to grow. I've spent 6 years talking to businesses about why and why not they are growing and what positions they have or are not filling. And I think that I've got that unique perspective to be able to lead this conversation. We've got to be a regional player. We can't just think within the city limits of Peoria, because there is a regional play that we can do whenever we are trying to attract new businesses. And last, I think that we also have to look at what we can do to really incentivize and sort of spark that interest within our young people. And that's why you've seen a lot of hours that I've spent on such programs as Align Peoria and APSCO, where we've actually done paid internships for those that may be able to get into a career force that they may not have seen before or been able to experience, and so that they can see the possibilities there. But it also was able to provide, through Peoria Promise and leading that way, $500,000 that we were able to raise in a single year to be able to write scholarships for credentials.
Thank you. All right. Ms. St. Louis, your response, please.
Can you repeat the question, please?
Certainly. So the city of Peoria has continued to suffer from population loss. A listener asked, what specific plans will you initiate to broaden Peoria's tax base, both in terms of external promotion and our own internal development?
Yeah, I think my entire platform is about growing Peoria's tax base. And to put it very bluntly, no one wants to live in a city where we have high unemployment rates, where we have been labeled as the worst place for Black Americans to live, where we have 1 in 4 people living at or below the poverty level, where we have some of the most, or been rated as having the most segregated schools in the country. All of those things are reasons why people leave Peoria. And in order to grow our population, in order for people to want to live here and do business here and spend money here, we really have to work on changing systemic issues that made those things possible to begin with. So we really have to look at our systems and our policies that we have in place and start undoing those harms that we've created, that local government has created, in the environment we've created for those types of negative things to grow. So I am looking to see how we can revitalize our neighborhoods, rejuvenate our economy, reimagine public safety, rebuild the table, give people more say-so over their tax dollars, how they're being spent, but then also really figure out how we can economically empower our residents so that they're spending more money here in Peoria, growing our sales tax, and have more money to purchase homes.
Thank you. Ms. Ali, your response, please.
Population growth is actually part of my platform. The city of Peoria previously had a Department of Workforce Development. It had a Department of Economic Development. It has neither now. It has basically left those responsibilities up to other agencies within our area, within our region. But the city has responsible for creating a workforce that will attract industries, a workforce that will create jobs, family sustaining jobs for its citizens. We have that responsibility. As mayor, I will be directly involved. I have more than 25 years experience in economic and workforce development. The mayor should be the champion for Peoria in these areas, just like Columbus, Ohio. Columbus, Ohio it's one of the fastest growing cities in the nation, the fastest growing cities in the Midwest. It's a smart city. It won a $50 million grant in the Smart City contest. It actually changed that 50 million into 150 million, committed to 150,000 jobs over a 10-year period. We live in the Frost Belt just like Columbus. We don't live in the Sun Belt. We can learn a lot from Columbus. We can become a little sister, but we can grow Peoria in a similar fashion that Columbus, Ohio is growing by leaps and bounds.
Thank you. Mr. Diaz, your response, please.
Yes. When we talk about the Peoria population loss, we have to look at why are people leaving. Part of it is crime. Part of it is that we are losing the value of our properties every year. And what are we doing to change that at City Hall? One of the things that I have experienced personally is the lack of responsiveness and ability to get things done with City Hall. When I've reached out to city council members or to leadership at the city, you don't always get a response. Maybe the email ends up in the junk or the spam folder, and so they never saw it. But we need to be better at working with our citizens to help them find their dreams, which will help internally grow our city. When you look at the external growth, it's awesome that I saw over the summer, there's a woman who did TikTok videos and has convinced others to move to Peoria. And walking the neighborhoods, I've talked to artists and others that have moved here because we are affordable. We are a place that has a riverfront, that has amenities that really you would pay 10 times as much for a home that you can buy here. We have to be better at marketing ourselves, but we can only do that once we have the reform in place at City Hall through policy that makes it that city staff responds in 48 hours, that we reduce the red tape and the barriers of entry for residents and businesses alike.
Thank you. Next question regards, we've seen the conversation on racial disparities within the city of Peoria evolve in recent years, but there is still more work to be done. What is your strategy to address and make strides on tackling racial inequity in the city of Peoria? Mr. Reckriegel, it's your question first.
I sure hope that nobody in the city of Peoria had to wait for a magazine or newspaper article to know that we had opportunities and challenges that we needed to face. We have an inequality. And as council member and off of council, I have worked continuously in various ways to be able to bridge this gap. And I think there's a lot of work to be done. But in just small efforts of what I've done, we have worked through internship programs to be able to provide for the most vulnerable opportunities to be able to experience different aspects that they have not been able to experience in workforce opportunities, so that they could also see that there was maybe a different path or some other ideas that they wanted to pursue. I've been able to provide scholarships to be able to go on for postgraduate education, and have led the charge for a year to be able to raise $500,000 on being able to do that. We've worked on new housing programs to be able to provide affordable quality housing within our neighborhoods. And I think that there's much more work to be done. We need to make for sure that our business, that we have those opportunities throughout our city. And so that there isn't a transportation inequality, and that we have an employment equity for all of our people.
Thank you. Ms. St. Louis, it's your question.
My apologies, had a little trouble unmuting myself there. Okay, so the question was, what is my plan for racial inequality?
Yes.
All right, so first I want to start by saying that there are, many moral reasons why we should focus on equity, but it's also important to realize that not everybody is motivated by the same moral reasons. So we have to be able to draw the connections between the outcomes of our people and our community to the future of our economy for it to begin to make a real shift in terms of level of importance. I think that Peoria could do a lot for racial inequity by first acknowledging that it exists. I think we still have people in leadership positions, in elected positions, who are in denial about the level in which racism exists here in Peoria, and then really work through policy to undo a lot of those harms. I think it's going to take someone who has been advocating for racial inequity for a long time, who knows what the issues are and what is needed to actually curtail that. And, that has been me for the last 17 years. I think that we also should be adopting things like One Peoria, which could be a city racial and social equity policy, which would require that race and equity be considered in all planning and decision-making across the government. So we should be centering racial equity at the center of all of our strategies.
Thank you. Ms. Ali, your question.
Yes, I've been involved in diversity, equity, and inclusion for many, many years as Illinois Central College's chief diversity officer, and also held that position with Bradley University as their first director of multicultural student services. I've been an advocate for equity, and I made a promise or a commitment over a year ago when I started studying the work that they were doing in King County, Washington, that we wanted to bring some of those efforts to Peoria, leading with racial justice and equity. And I worked with many community leaders to propose a joint commission, a Peoria City County Commission on Racial Justice and Equity. The city and the county adopted that ordinance on October 29th. We continue to accept applications for commission members, and we will be making recommendations for individuals, over 160 people, to use data to begin to close gaps in 8 different areas, from housing to justice to youth and child development to transportation and mobility to environment and jobs and workforce. All these areas where we know there are gaps and there are inequities based upon race. So we're doing it in a systemic way to address a systemic problem. I invite you to participate.
Thank you. Mr. Diaz, your response.
I'm the only candidate that lives in a majority minority neighborhood. I see this every day when I walk out my door, the biases that we have in place. The commission that was just formed in October, it took me 3 months to get them to change the application so that you didn't have to have a requirement of being employed to be on that commission. So let's think about that for 1 second. The bias in place, if we want to address inequity and talk to those that are least represented, yet you had to be employed to get on that commission. It was this last week that changed. So I see this every day. Part of it because I go through these processes, having grown up in the North Valley, having experienced all of this in my life, and still being able to come out and achieve, because I have found success in Peoria, and we have people that want to change this story. We have great people who say Black Lives Matter, period, that we can't have justice until then. I go to a church that believes that and that has that out in front of our church at St. Paul's Episcopal. So we need to have someone who's lived it, who's experienced it, and who continues to fight on behalf of everybody in their neighborhood and the community at large.
Thank you. Mr. Montelongo, your response, please.
Thank you. So I am a minority, and I understand the many challenges and struggles that minorities have. As a business person, I'm a board member and helped create the Greater Peoria Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I've been part of the Illinois Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I've been an advocate, going to Springfield, going to our nation's capital to talk to state senators and congresspeople to explain the struggles that we have. And I enjoy doing that. As far as the city council side, during my very first term, I put together a program to teach women and minority-owned businesses how to do business with the city. It's still a program that's in place today. But those are a few examples. I think some other examples for, we have hiring goals, we have contracting goals, and we always come up short. That is one area that we need to put on our city manager's goals to achieve those goals that we have set. Other things that I'd like to do more is I currently have a monthly meeting. I'd like to start having quarterly meetings throughout the entire city as the mayor.
Thank you. Appreciate that. Your next question regards food deserts in the city of Peoria. Many areas in our community are considered food deserts as grocery stores have closed, forcing many to travel further for access to fresh foods. What will you do to bring an end to the food deserts in our community? Ms. St. Louis, it's your question first.
Wonderful. And I will like to point out that I too live in a neighborhood with majority minorities as well. So you are not the only candidate. As far as food deserts go, I really want to just point out the fact that we have to have communities that will sustain a grocery store. And right now we don't have that. So we can put a grocery store on the South End, we can put a grocery store on the East Bluff, but if we don't have people going in because they don't have the resources to spend to sustain it, we're going to end up back in the situation that we've been in. So we really need to focus on economically empowering our residents through something like a monthly stimulus experiment and increasing wages to a livable wage here in our city, which we can do more immediately in order to ensure that people have enough resources to sustain a grocery store. In the meantime and in between time, I think that we can really empower local, smaller, scalable businesses who are convenience stores. They can be multi-use, maybe help them expand some of the products that they're carrying for our residents until we're able to get something bigger, and use some of the vacant buildings here to establish smaller convenience stores that carry fresh produce and other things that would be helpful to our communities.
Yes. Thank you very much. Ms. Ali, your response, please.
Yes, first I wanted to thank Mr. Diaz for pointing out an apparent technical problem with the application for the Commission on Racial Justice and Equity. Anybody can join that. You don't need to have a job, and you can be retired or you can be never employed as long as you have a passion for the work. So I thank you for fixing that. I was not aware it was a problem. So regarding these food deserts that we have on the south side, that we have on the near north side, of Peoria. We have to have quality housing in these areas. The South Side has over 900 vacant lots. We've torn down homes and we have not replaced them. We have to have housing developments and investors to bring the population back. People want to live in these areas. They move into other areas because they don't have quality housing in those areas. If we don't get the quality housing there, we won't have the people to support the grocery stores, or for that matter, to support the schools. We want the population in these areas. Otherwise, we're going to have consolidation, more consolidation of schools to take place, more businesses that exit these areas. When I grew up on the South Side, there were 33,000 people. Today, there's less than 14,000 people that live there. We have to have the housing. We have to have the workforce earn and learn programs and the workforce education and training within these areas.
Thank you. Mr. Diaz, your response.
So that's really one of my biggest passions in terms of food desert. My family started Urban Acres 4 years ago, and we've provided over 5,000 pounds of produce into the community because we are in part of that food desert. The thing is, we have multiple small shops. We have the Tienda Mexicana, we have the international market that do offer some of the produce and the other items. It's not just a convenience store. And we have to find ways to empower those business owners. It doesn't make sense for us to spend our taxpayer dollars to put some of these small grocers out of business. We need to be working with them, talking with them, and asking, how do we get you to sell more produce? How do we connect you with some of the larger buyers? And what can we do to strengthen our neighborhoods? These small markets in the East Bluff and on the North End, they make these neighborhoods great. They bring people into this community that would not otherwise have a reason to stop. It's what we do at the North Valley Farmers Market during the summer. And over 60% of the people going into the international market are buying stuff, but they're not from our neighborhood. So instead of trying to find some big grocer or chain to come in and put someone out of business, why don't we work with the people in our community to empower them to grow and to actually be better businesses?
Thank you. Mr. Montelongo, your response.
Sure, thank you. So I think it comes right back around to economic development. And we have to be growing jobs. People have jobs, people can afford to buy stuff. It creates an economy. And that's where our effort needs to be at. We need to be looking at more growth policies. I did support a tax abatement that Councilman Kelly brought forward, which encourages new development into some of these areas. And that's exactly what we need to be looking for. When we grow the economy, things around it get better. So that would be my response on how we start to fix the problem.
Thank you. Mr. Ruckriegel, your response.
We've got to make for sure that we have economic development and livable wage jobs and help to start to grow our neighborhoods back again. But we also shouldn't forget that the grocery industry is changing. It's different than it ever has been, and it probably will look very different in the next 3 to 5 years from what it is today. We've got very strong small grocers that have started to pop up, and we need to respect and acknowledge them and be able to see how they can be part of the solution. We've got a lot of organizations that are doing community farming and that are providing fresh produce, and just be able to see how we can partner with their attributes to be able to help solve this problem. And in the meantime, while we're looking for the permanent solution, we need to be able to come up with a plan that we can be able to work with our existing grocers, small and large, to be able to help meet the need. There's a transportation inequality within our community that also feeds into this. But just recently, not too long ago, I met with a grocer who went into an area that was a food desert in Louisville, Kentucky. And without gouging prices, without being able to limit the choice, they were able to provide a grocery experience that for them was very good and for the neighborhood was very good. And as they say, it was one of their strongest grocery stores that they've had. So that there can be a win-win if we really work together to be able to solve this. But we can't just rely on it happening by circumstance.
Thank you. Take this opportunity to mention you are listening to WCBU election coverage in partnership with the League of Women Voters of Greater Peoria and the Peoria Public Library. This is the forum with the candidates on the ballot for Peoria Mayor in the February 23rd election. The next question goes to Ms. Ali. This one is, how do you advocate for causes you are passionate about with those who may not agree with you, either on the council or elsewhere? Tell us how you work to build consensus to get things done.
So being in the business of diversity means that you work with difference all the time, and you educate on bringing people together to try to find common ground, to have reasonable conversations, to create safe places so that people can talk about very difficult issues. So that's how I operate. I've been trained to operate that way. It's part of my DNA now. I can work with about anyone, regardless of our differences, whether those be political differences, whether they be issue differences. I think that it's important to have the dialogue, to have the conversation so that we can establish some common ground. Whether we differ or not, we are one community, and we have to work together to support the community that we serve, the community that we love. So I think, being a collaborator is important. Being a good listener is important. And that's one of the tools that I use, is to listen, to try to use good listening skills, to try to consider a different point of view from my own. I think those are good lessons to good leadership. And those are things that I bring to the table in terms of my experience with diversity and difference.
Thank you. Mr. Diaz, your response, please.
As an advocate for my causes, when I find myself arguing with the coworker or trying to make a plea to city staff or council members, I try to appeal to empathy, because I want people to understand that it's not always your way or the highway, but you have to understand where people are coming from. You can't look at someone and judge them by the clothes that they're wearing or where they live. You have to actually sit down and listen, break bread, and find commonality, because we may have differences on how we accomplish something, but I think everyone in this forum and those that are serving us in elected office, they do want to see the best for our community. So it's a matter of trying to appeal to empathy and then communicate. Make sure that that communication line is always open, that it's one of those ideas that, for me, I sell equipment for Caterpillar, and I have been very successful in that manner because I communicate and talk to people and pick up the phone rather than just relying on an email or a text message. We have to start sitting down and talking to each other, looking each other in the eye and figuring out where we have commonality, where we can share empathy, and then how we can move forward to be successful for our community.
Thank you. Mr. Montelongo, your response, please.
Do you mind repeating the question again?
Sure. How do you advocate for causes you are passionate about with those who may not agree with you, either on the council or elsewhere? Tell us how you work to build consensus to get things done.
Sure, thank you. So for the last 10 years, I've been having monthly meetings with the public. At these meetings, everything's open for discussion. You hear many different ideas and thoughts, some opposing one another. What's important as being a council person, and especially the mayor, is your job is to listen. And then once you understand what's going on, then trying to come up with some solutions with them. I did this very same thing with a business roundtable that I created when I brought together 3 major competitors that are developers. some people thought I was crazy trying to bring them together. They've been fierce competitors. But what we did is we started talking about, once I got them together, we started talking about things that they want to accomplish, some common goals, and the discussions went much, much better. Certainly, I've been serving on the city council now for 12 years, and we have many passionate things, many things that people are passionate about as far as discussion goes. You have to be careful to make sure you're a good listener and respect each other's. And there's always another vote that's going to be coming the next day. So don't base it all off of one particular vote.
Thank you. Mr. Ruckriegel, your response, please.
Boards, city council, groups that get together. The good thing about that is not everybody has the same opinion, the same background, or the same optics. And the reason that they come together is because they need to share those opinions, share those ideas, and share those problem-solving abilities to be able to come out with the best solution. So what I've done in my history, and it is shown to be very successful in actual problem-solving for organizations here in town and for some things around city council as well and within city hall, is you really have to have a relationship that's based on communication, trust, honesty, and being able to see the optics from the other person, so that as you're coming together to a solution, realizing that what you may have thought as your first solution, there's a place to be able to move towards. And once you actually discuss the issues and where you want to go, you'll see that there is overlap, that there's room for improvement, and actually the outcome is usually much better. The biggest thing there is to always listen, to be a part of the solution-making process, and to never shut down or assume that there is nothing else to hear, to learn, to educate yourself about, or that somebody else with a differing opinion doesn't have something else to offer to the conversation.
Thank you. Ms. St. Louis, your response, please.
Could you repeat the question? I think
Absolutely.
I got it. I just want to make sure.
How would you advocate for causes you are passionate about with those who may not agree with you, either on the council or elsewhere? Tell us how you work to build consensus to get things done.
Thank you. So my title at my previous job was Central Illinois Coalition Organizer. And part of the work that I did was build coalitions between community organizations and labor coalitions to work on issues throughout the year, political issues throughout the year, to build more political power, to ensure that we could get the wins and the resources and the things that we needed for our communities. So I have extensive knowledge and background in being able to build coalitions with people and with organizations and groups with varying beliefs to find our commonalities to build more political power. In addition to that, I have knocked on hundreds of thousands of doors and made hundreds of thousands of phone calls to residents here in the Peoria area about issues. I've been able to hear them out, hear their concerns, listen to them, and find where we agree. So I'm really good at talking to people and being able to listen to what people are passionate about and what they care about. In addition to that, I have also lost my train of thought. So there we go. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. We're nearing the end of tonight's forum. Next, our candidates will have 90 seconds for a closing statement, starting with Mr. Diaz.
Thank you. I am running for mayor to fix the problems in our community, to make it a better place to raise a family and set down roots. I'm running because, like many of you, I've seen property values take a hit. I've seen the impact of crime and poverty in our community, and it must change. This election offers us the opportunity to make that change. I am that change. I don't represent any special interest groups, and I have over 20 years of experience working with government. I want to put that work experience to work for you. In this campaign, I've led with transparency and my heart. Our best days are ahead of us, friends. We have over $500 million slated to be invested in our community over the next 5 years, and that's just the start. If we reduce the barriers of entry for business owners, if we engage the residents of Peoria to take action on their blocks and begin to grow our city again, there's no problem that we can't handle. In order to make these changes, we must have a leader that understands policy and will commit to going to work for you. Early voting's already begun. Election day is February 23rd, and I'm asking for your vote. Please visit diazformayor.com to learn more about me and my positions on the issues impacting our city. Thank you, and vote Diaz for mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Montelongo, your closing statement, please.
Thank you again, WCBU and the League of Women Voters, for putting this forum together. Between now and February 23rd, you'll be choosing who you think is the best candidate to serve this community as mayor of Peoria. Peoria is in need of an experienced business professional with city council experience that can tackle our financial crisis, deliver basic city services, and work with our business community to grow jobs and our economy. And that person is me. I have a proven track record as a city council member, both as a district and an at-large for almost 12 years. I have almost 2 times as much experience as all of my opponents combined. I have a master's in business administration, and I bring 30 years of business experience to help our businesses grow and expand. I want to be your next mayor and serve the people. Vote Jim Montelongo. Please see my website for more information, jimmontelongo.com.
Thank you. Mr. Reckriegel, your closing statement.
The job of city council member and the job of mayor are 2 very different positions. With the job of mayor, you must balance all of the requests, priorities, and voices of the city. And I want to be that person for you. I've got the most experience on actual job creation, working on small businesses and growing and working on large businesses, listening to the businesses and the residents about why and why not they choose to make Peoria home. I've opposed taxes, fees, fines, extra charges that drive businesses and our residents away. But I've also helped build up our community. I did that before I was on council. I've continued to do that while on the council, and I will do that as your mayor. What you will get in me is an experienced leader who will put their talents and their skills to work each and every day to make Peoria a better place. And you have my commitment that I will work as hard, if not harder, than anybody else we put on the team, because I think together, working side by side, making sure that all of our city's priorities are handled, we will be able to make Peoria a better place to call home and a place where we will see population grow and businesses return.
Thank you. Ms. St. Louis, your closing statement, please.
Thank you. I am the only candidate actively challenging the status quo. I've spent 17 years prior to running for office working in the community, trying to get our community the resources it deserves. I think in order to move Peoria forward, you need a mayor who is willing to take leaps and bounds toward progress, not baby steps. I have spent time as a community organizer, empowering residents and building coalitions. I've also spent time as the chairwoman and president of the Peoria Black Chamber of Commerce, connecting businesses to resources and advocating for them at the state level. I can bring this unique blend of experience along with a strong vision and fresh eyes and ideas to help Peoria build forward momentum and get us where we need to be. We have current city council members running for mayor, and they've been on council between 2 and 12 years and have had the opportunity to implement their ideas we've heard today, and they have not done it. If you want to hear a new voice, if you want more accountability of our council members, if you want to have more input on decisions, it's smarter and it's more strategic to add a new voice to the council rather than just shuffling chairs. If you enjoy the current council members and what they have to say, great. They can stay where they are on the council, but we need to add a new voice with new ideas and who wants to encourage accountability, transparency, and public participation. I am that voice. As an organizer, I've knocked thousands of doors. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Ms. Ali, your closing statement, please.
Having successfully led large-scale government and business organizations, combined with extensive community work, I bring a unique set of skills to the position of mayor. Serving as an at-large member of the Peoria City Council for the past 20 months has provided me additional insight into the inner workings of Peoria City government. If elected, I will retire early from my wonderful longtime job as Vice President of Workforce and Diversity at Illinois Central College. I will serve as a full-time mayor without additional expense to the taxpayers or the distraction of another full-time job. Peoria needs a leader that understands pain, a leader that can manage under stress. Peoria needs a leader that is in touch with all parts of this community. I have been trained in crisis management, and I problem solve every single day of my life. My life is a testimony of challenges overcome. I am a product of Peoria. The life I have lived here, the mentorship I have received here, the success I have had here. As mayor, I will be the qualified champion that Peoria needs here and now. I encourage you to vote for me, Rita Ali.
Thank you. We've reached the end of tonight's forum. Thanks to our candidates for being here virtually and our partners at the League of Women Voters of Greater Peoria and the Peoria Public Library. You can learn more about all the candidates on the ballot this year at our voter guide at WCBU.org. Early voting is now open. Go and vote. Thank you very much.